You're listening to the Liberty Talks podcast with Michael Anderson and John Douglas. Today we'll be speaking about the Houston Police Department's police-involved shooting.
We have to find a way to talk and have dialogue and be tolerant between other views.
You have to have open dialogue, and that's where free speech is so important.
Consent's a very important thing, and today in the Me Too movement, it's been very important because I think it's really opened up a lot of eyes.
I think we should get away from this hookup culture and get back to relationships, because when you have a relationship, you have that communication, you have that connection.
If you committed sexual assault, doesn't matter when it was, you should be held accountable for that. However, we have to make sure that we actually make sure they committed sexual assault, and we have to make sure that all allegations are verified.
They'll put in these programs thinking that it'll help everyone, but what they forget is that the pathway to hell is paved with good intention.
And I think that's what this whole movement is all about anyways, is trying to be open to ideas.
So how's it going, guys? Michael Anderson here. Tonight, it'll just be me, myself, and I, numero uno, Mr. Anderson, here talking to you guys. Actually, a little bit different from what we usually do here at Liberty Talks. Most of the time, we have either John Douglas, another host like myself, and I, or a contributor of ours. But tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about something that is actually near and dear to my heart. As many of you know, I recently moved from Houston, Texas to Little Rock, Arkansas. And in Houston, I had the reputation of being a very outspoken activist and very well connected in the city of Houston. One of the things that I personally helped do in the city of Houston was work with Black Lives Matter in 2016 to help get body camera reform policy passed. Now, the context behind this is actually during 2016, there was what we called in Houston or in Texas, the Dallas shooting. In the Dallas shooting of 2016, what happened was Black Lives Matter protests and police officers came together, hugging, joining hands, and talking about how they can make their community better. Then there was a maniac with a gun who started unloading fire on police officers. At that time, during the summer of 2016, I started up my Young Americans for Liberty chapter. And at that time, I had people reaching out to me personally saying, Mike, we have got to do something. We cannot let Houston end up like Dallas. So what did I do? I reached out to my friends and colleagues at Texas Southern University who happen to be connected with Black Lives Matter. And we helped organize a demonstration and a protest and gave speeches to City Hall, Young Americans for Liberty, Black Lives Matter, and other groups as well to talk about why we need body camera reform policy. Essentially, our argument was that the body camera benefited both the citizens and the police officers, that it would help eliminate the gray area. Plus, one of my really good friends, Jerry Ford, who actually helped lead the protest, said that this is a slap in the face to the taxpayers of Houston because we spent X number of dollars on body camera policy last year or 2 years ago, and then now we're still having this same problem because what happened in the city of Houston to spark this protest was not just the Dallas shooting, but an unarmed black man got shot in Houston. And in Houston, you have to turn the body camera on, which the camera records 30 seconds beforehand. So the officer turned their body camera on 40 seconds after shooting and killing an unarmed black man. And what our activism did in the city of Houston was help make that 30 seconds turn into 2 minutes. So officers still have to turn on and off their body camera, but the audio and video records up to 2 minutes before they turn on the body camera. So that way officers, if involved into a very drastic situation, they can actually turn on their body camera and still capture 2 minutes before they turn it on. Now, what does this have to do with what's going on in Houston? I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but on Monday last week in Houston, Texas, we got word that there was an officer-involved shooting. 4 officers, maybe even 5 officers, were involved in this shooting. And as soon as the news broke, what we heard was that it was an officer involved shooting. And yes, pray for the officers. And what the police union president said was very, very powerful. You had conservatives all across the country retweeting and reposting and hashtag enough is enough for what he said. So I'm going to go ahead and play you the audio clip of what he said.
But now I want to speak on behalf of the 5,200 brave men and women of the Houston Police Department and the other 800,000 police officers that are working these streets every single day, putting their lives on the line. We are sick and tired of having targets on our back. We are sick and tired of having dirtbags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is protect this community and protect our families. Enough is enough. And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. We've had enough, folks. We're out there doing our jobs every day, putting our lives on the line for our families.
That was
Enough is enough.
HPD Union President Joe Gamaldi saying, we are tired of having targets on our back. We are tired of dirtbags talking about killing us in the streets. Very powerful words from police union president. And this sparked people really backing him up. Like conservatives all across the nation retweeting, hashtagging, enough is enough. Now, did you notice what he said after those powerful words? What he said afterwards was that if you are the people spreading this hateful rhetoric, we have your numbers and we will hold you accountable every time you stir the pot. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds like Joe Gamaldi does not understand what the First Amendment means. Now, I'm just going to assume that Joe is a conservative. I'm not really sure. But from his hardcore rhetoric, it sounds like he is very conservative. Now, I'm going to tell you, I used to have to educate University of Houston college leftists about the First Amendment and free speech. And Joe Gamaldi, let me just tell you that hate speech is free speech. No matter whether you disagree with what someone says or not, or they say the most hateful and horrendous thing ever, that is free speech. And I will fight for your right and my right and his right and everyone's right to say whatever they want, whether I disagree with it or not, because that is what the First Amendment is all about. Now, let's recap. We already heard what Joe Gamaldi's response was due to this officer-involved shooting. Now, what happened after that? Like, this is how it kind of went out to me. I heard on Monday my friend Isaiah Carey tweeting out, officer-involved shooting, 4 officers hit. Then we see Joe Gamaldi's reaction, very passionate, very emotional reaction. Then the facts come out. And I'm going to read you an article actually posted by Reason. Fantastic people over at Reason. I love these writers, and they really break down the facts a lot. So the title of this article is "The Cops Were the Aggressors in This Week's Deadly Shooting Drug Raid." So it starts off saying that many people will be reassured to learn that the men who stormed into the house on Harding Street where police officers were serving a drug warrant. And I'm not one of those people, and let me explain why. So he starts off saying, yes, they were serving a drug warrant, but he starts off talking about the discrepancies within the chief's report and then actual facts, and then changing the facts after reporting it the first time. So at the press conference on Monday night, the Houston police chief said that the plainclothes narcotics cops serving the warrant announced themselves as police officers while simultaneously breaching the door. Meanwhile, uniformed officers waiting in or nearby a marked police unit outside the house hit the siren and the lights so that way they knew the cops were there. Maybe that's true, but it is possible that the victim did not hear the sirens or did not connect it to the men busting in his house. It is also very plausible that the officer's announcement, which by the chief's account happened at the same moment that they were knocking down the door, did not register among the noise or confusion or gun blasts. Now, the chief says immediately upon breaching the door that the officers came under fire from 1 or 2 suspects inside the house. But he revealed during that press conference the next day that it was actually the police officers who fired first, killing what described as a very large pit bull that charged at officers. When a reporter asked whether the victims had known that police were raiding them, the chief said that a lot of drug houses have surveillance systems, and they want to know when cops are coming by. Contrary to the implication, KHOU and CBS affiliates in Houston report that the house had no security or surveillance video footage. So, according to the chief, the investigation had led to the raid began with a neighbor that had the courage to say, "We're not going to put up with this anymore, and we're tired and think that they're dealing drugs out of this house." The chief went on to say that actually they actually bought black tar heroin at the location and were serving a warrant. But according to the Houston Chronicle, the neighbors of these two, who had been married for 21 years, kept to themselves and didn't seem like troublemakers. The victim's sister actually told the paper that she talked to her brother, a disabled 59-year-old Navy veteran, last week who seemed fine and never seen any indication that him and his wife were involved with drugs. "I don't buy it at all," she said. "Not one hot minute." Our relatives and friends offered similar disbelief. KOHU reports that the victim apparently had no criminal record, and the only black mark on his name was theft by check, which was overpaying $145. The chief actually tried to disguise the reality by arguing that the illegal drug trade drives violence in Houston. And, quote, "While people think drugs are a harmless crime," he said Monday, quote, "the industry is not harmless, and a lot of shootings we see in our city begin with the drug crimes and people fighting over gang territory," end quote. But crimes like those are not inherent to the drug business. They are a consequence of prohibition, which creates a black market which participants cannot rely on legal production and tend to resolve disputes with violence. The chief used the deadly drug raid as a pretext to push gun control by saying politicians should enact policies to curtail the proliferation of firearms in the hands of people that have no business having guns. The only specific example that he mentioned was requiring background checks for anyone who buys firearms at a gun show, whether or not the seller had a federally licensed dealer or not. But if the local press reports were correct about the victims having no drug or criminal record, this would not disqualify them from owning guns. In addition, they had a .357 Magnum revolver, they had a 12-gauge shotgun, a 20-gauge shotgun, and a .22 rifle. And if you look at these guns, these are not semi-automatic weapons. They are not high-capacity rifles. These are actually a limited amount of guns comparison to what many, many people have in Texas. So it's kind of interesting. Then it goes to Joe Gamaldi, the president of the Houston Police Officers Union. And he condemned people who criticize cops, saying, "We are sick and tired of having targets on our back." He said on Monday night that enough is enough. And if you're the ones out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've got your number now. And we're going to keep track of all y'all. And we're going to make sure we're going to be holding you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. So let me just backtrack a little bit. So what actually happened and what are the reports saying? So the reports are actually saying that officers did not have just a warrant. They actually participated in a no-knock raid, which means that they kicked in the door without identifying themselves. But according to the reports, at first, the police officers announced themselves as police officers and ran the sirens. However, let's put this into context. Police officers barge into your house, guns blazing. And apparently, from what this is saying, they were unmarked. So an unmarked gang member, police officer, someone that is unmarked and you don't know it's a police officer, kicks in your door and starts shooting. What do? I tell you, I grab my gun and I start shooting back because that's what we do in Texas. And that's what we should do in America. We do not stand up to people kicking down our doors and shooting us. That's just not what happens in this country. And it's not what should happen. So the police officers barge in, guns blazing, and the Navy veteran shoots back. Now, it's unclear how exactly his wife got caught up into the situation, but she actually died too. But from reports, it actually says that her husband was the only one actually shooting back at police officers. So this is a little bit of a weird situation. How did the police officers end up killing his wife? Did she resist? Probably. But what I think is even more outrageous about this is that Joe Gamaldi's statement. Don't get me wrong. I support the men in blue, but I want to hold them accountable. We have to hold our police officers and government officials accountable. And this outrage that Joe Gamaldi had was literally just painting a false narrative and was a fake outrage to something that he wanted the people to believe. He wanted the people to believe that Black Lives Matter, maybe not, but that activists and people that hate cops are killing cops, and that's the reason why these cops got murdered. No, sir. The reason why these cops got hit and got shot was because of over-policing and ineffective policies. We should not be sending our police officers in unmarked, with no-knock raids, guns blazing over the war on drugs, in the war on drugs, because this is an unintended consequence of the war on drugs. Who is the victim? Chief, you say that this is not a harmless crime, but the only thing that happened was you, sir, you got police officers shot and got police officers in ICU, and you are responsible for the death of 2 innocent Houstonians. Because what happened when police officers got into the house? They didn't find any drugs. They found a little bit of marijuana, which is actually legal in Houston. In Houston, you can carry up to, I believe it's either a few grams or an OZ without anything besides maybe a traffic ticket. You know, that's what they do in Houston. So, where is this? I mean, Joe Gamaldi, I am outraged by your fake outrage. You are using this false narrative to push your narrative and to make it seem like it's not your fault or not the chief's fault or whoever supervisor set this up. That's whose fault this is. Now, let me get back to the right to freedom of speech. Joe says, if you're the one stirring the pot, if you think that cops are the enemy, and you have this hateful rhetoric, we're coming at you and we're going to hold you accountable for your actions. Well, you know what, Joe? Speech is not an action that has any victims. The only thing that is against free speech, or the only thing that is not free speech, is when someone makes a direct violent threat. And no one is making any threats against police officers. Saying F the police or that cops are racist is not anything than free speech, okay? And you know what, Joe? Come after me. If you want to come after someone, I dare you to come after me, because I criticize police all the time, because I criticize them when they are wrong. Police officers should be better than this, and so should the police union. Now, I do want to give the police chief a little bit of credit where credit is due, although he did try to utilize this, again, fake outrage and false narrative to push his agenda with, trying to say we need more gun control. According to KOHU, Houston Police Chief condemns remarks by Union President Joe Gamaldi. The chief said Thursday, without a doubt, rhetoric had nothing to do with this. And essentially, he says that Joe was really over-emotional. He says that a lot of the things he said was probably out of line and very out of line from his perspective. Now, this is coming back and forth. Now we have this even bigger divide in Houston right now between people that want accountable government, that want freedom, and that blind conservatives that just support the police. Now, I want to challenge you conservatives, because I've worked with a lot of you guys at the University of Houston and in the city of Houston talking about freedom of speech. and talking about how hate speech is free speech and how we should be protecting everyone's right to say whatever they want, whether we adamantly disagree with them or not. And I have a hard time seeing many conservatives stand up for this issue. The only conservatives I've seen stand up for this issue in Houston is the Republican Liberty Caucus, and kudos to you guys. But those are my guys. I love the RLC. But those are the liberty fighters. Where are the rest of the conservatives? Where are the rest of Republicans at this? Where are they? They're hiding with their tail between their legs and too busy trying to protect the thin blue line. Well, let me tell you something, guys. As much as I think that Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter and all lives matter, the whole thin blue line, that whole blue line that they talk about, Blue Lives Matter, that's a terrible context to even bring up the whole idea of, oh, we need to protect police officers and police officers don't need to be shot. Because the thin blue line is an immoral police practice. It's a police practice that says, oh, you did something wrong? Well, you're one of me. We are in this together. We're on the same team. We're both cops. So I'm going to take up for you. And that is immoral. Like I said, we need to be holding police officers accountable for this. So in a nutshell, police officers got shot. It was a no-knock raid over the war on drugs. And the police department, along with the police union president, is trying to build up this false narrative that hateful rhetoric is the reason why police officers are getting shot, especially in Houston, and that's just completely wrong. Now, look, like I keep saying, I support law enforcement. There are plenty of good officers out there that lay their lives on the line every single day, knowing that they have a target on their back, knowing that they could get shot, knowing that they're leaving their family behind every single day and they may not see them ever again. And I have tremendous respect for those people. But Joe Gamaldi, what you said is absolutely irreprehensible. Everyone should be jumping on you, and you should resign. At the very least, you should apologize for your incoherent words. Because you know what gets police officers shot and end up in ICU? Shoddy police practices. Police practices like no-knock raids. Police practices like policing the war on drugs rather than policing victim crimes. The way I see it, if there's no victim, there's no crime.